Hello everybody, yes that is right. I gathered all the pieces of Exodia and made what I thought would be a truly terrifying build. I am of course talking about the 100% Metamorphosis Uptime build. If you didn't know already, Metamorphosis is a warlock ability where you transform into a demon and gain some very cool new abilities. This video is going to be me talking about the whole process of creating this build from start to finish, from the treasure hunting to find the right random enchants on items to the various builds that I tried out with the help from some friends. My obsession with Metamorphosis started because I hadn't seen anyone using it on the server yet. Those who had used it told me it was useless and not worth investing in. Now I like to try things and make them work, however useless they are. I also loved the Metamorphosis demon form model. I used to watch my older brother who played Warlock using it back in Wrath of the Lich King, and I recently played Demonology Warlock for PvP in Warlords of Draenor, so I was determined to get it to work. On the face of it, the form looks amazing, giving 600% increased armor, plus 20% flat damage and a 6% reduced chance to be critically hit. The only downside was that it was a 3-minute cooldown for 30 seconds of demon carnage. Now I used to spend hours scanning the auction house looking for cool random enchants that I could make builds around. The idea of focusing builds around enchants rather than the talents themselves has been something I really wanted to try, as anyone can make a good build. But you have to invest in the right random enchants to make a great build. So whilst browsing the auction house, I saw a piece that had the enchant reduce the cooldown of Metamorphosis, demonic empowerment and fell domination by 10%. I didn't buy that item at the time regrettably, but it got me thinking. In the Demonology talent tree there is a tier 9 talent called Nemesis. This talent is the one that you see on the items. You can put 3 points into it in the talent tree to get 30% reduced cooldown on Metamorphosis, which means that you'll need 7 items in total to get 10 stacks of the talent and give full uptime in the form, thus reducing the 3-minute cooldown to 0. So I set out on my goal, hunting down items that I could use to become the ultimate demon man. Now up until now I kept this goal of mine a secret. I wanted to do what nobody had done before, and if people knew what I was up to, the prices on the auction house would skyrocket and I would not be able to buy the items that I needed. I think at the time people thought this enchant was a useless one, so I was looking, hoping to find items like the one I had found beforehand for a good price. I even tried farming for hours upon end, searching for the random enchant. I did find one myself, but after 3 weeks of searching the auction house and farming for gear, I decided to start looking in trade channels. As it was deemed a useless random enchant, I thought people must have been vendoring the gear instead of putting it on the auction house, so I put out a few advertisements in trade channels. Now there wasn't many responses selling me gear, but I had a lot of people whisper me telling me that either Metamorphosis was trash and there's no point building around it, or that it simply wouldn't work and the random enchant was just broken. To be honest, those people made me want to do it even more, so I kept on searching and I kept on looking and I started slowly picking up the pieces, the different pieces of Exodia. Although they were not cheap, I was paying on average 70 to 100 gold for each piece, which may not sound like much to most people, but I don't spend all day farming for gold, I make videos instead. So I spent so much time farming for gold, buying these pieces, and in the end I spent around 1,000 gold on items and then a few respecs as well. So this led to me having 0 dinero, but as I slowly accumulated the pieces, the population was dwindling, and I was losing hope about ever finding the remaining pieces of gear that would get me down to 0%. However, on the horizon was the Random Enchant event, and if you weren't there, this event was where they placed the forges in the major cities and they reduced the Random Enchant reroll costs down to quite low amounts. And I thought that this would be the last chance I ever had of finding the pieces I needed. So I played it tactically, at least I thought I did. Instead of gambling my gold away hoping for a piece with the enchant on, I'd just buy pieces that people rolled in the event. And sure enough, I got my final piece, the 7th piece of the puzzle. And I tried out Metamorphosis, waiting for it to have no cooldown, and lo and behold, it didn't work. The cooldown reset to 3 minutes. I was confused, and I was angry. It should work, shouldn't it? 100% cooldown reduction means no cooldown. And this is when people started laughing, saying I wasted my time and gold on a build that wouldn't have worked from the start. But after telling my problem to some other players, they recommended I try taking off one item to have 90% cooldown reduction. This would put the cooldown down from 180 seconds to 18 seconds, so this would still allow for the 100% uptime, as Metamorphosis is 30 seconds long. So going into Metaform, I waited 18 seconds to see if the cooldown would go off. But my abilities don't show any cooldown reduction visually, so it showed the normal 3-minute timer of cooldown, which really worried me. But ping, after 18 seconds I was able to press it again, and I yelled in delight, which nobody could understand because you speak in demonic form when you're in Metamorphosis. So, I had all the pieces of Exodia. Now it was time to craft the right build for it. With Metamorphosis comes some extra abilities, which lend themselves to various different builds. You have Immolation Aura, in my opinion the most powerful AoE ability in the game, pulsing heavy fire damage to all enemies. You get an AoE Taunt, which is a great tanking utility, and you also get Shadow Cleave and Demon Charge, some nice melee abilities. This gave me some choices on how I would like to build the form. My first test was a melee Metamorphosis build, suggested to me by my friend Shotzi. Sadly, in Metaform you can only use abilities that are Warlock abilities, or abilities that are marked that can be used in Form, of which some still can't be used as they are also classed as powerful cooldowns. So there is a massive limiting factor on what you can do as a demon. To make a decent melee build, you normally use active abilities using your weapon. Well, sadly none of that is available, so all of the damage would have to be passive or come from passive effects. Therefore, with the help of Shotzi and others, the following melee build was created. A link will be in the description so you can see the talents for yourself. It is a high passive damage, high strength, and also some bleed damage using deep wounds. It also uses strength to spell power conversions to maximise the Immolation Aura damage, as that scales so well with spell power. You get, I think it's a 240% scale with spell power, so you can get some insane damage from Immolation Aura. The footage which you're seeing in the background is me using this iteration of Demon Form. Sadly, I lost all of my other footage from the other types of builds as my PC's operating system corrupted and I lost a lot of data in the recovery, but it gives a good idea about what it's all about. In terms of the build's performance, for pure single target the damage was very inconsistent, relying upon Immolation Aura and lucky crits to provide most of the damage. On single target, if I was lucky, I'd pull a mediocre 700 to 1k damage with buffs. For AoE however, it was a different story. Speccing into Magma Totem and using Immolation Aura meant at times, with the right amount of mobs, I could get up to 5k AoE DPS. That really highlighted the strength of the build to me, high AoE damage every time Immolation Aura was available. I then tried out a caster variation, this time not so successful. Mana was a big issue, as was spell power. Due to the gear with the random enchants being mostly strength gear, I lost a lot of damage due to the spell power. I'm also not accustomed to playing a Destruction Warlock caster, so I probably lost a lot of damage due to inexperience there too. All in all though, the DPS variance of this build was sadly not as great as I hoped, with the plus 20 damage percent increase from the form acting as a neutralizer to poor gearing and lack of the multi-class abilities. Another thing I experimented with was tanking in Demon Form. The AoE taunt provided a powerful cooldown that allowed me to easily taunt mobs, and Immolation Aura was great at pulling unwanted threat at unwanted times when I tried to play as a DPS, so I therefore thought that tank would be a logical choice. Boasting 22k armour in form, I had maxed out my damage reduction at a flat 75%, but once again, no active abilities can be chosen, so I had to choose passive threat generations and flat damage reduction talents. I did try using Righteous Fury to get some threat from Holy Cleave damage from Seal of Command, however this didn't prove enough. When trying the build I was in a group with a freshly dinged boosted 60 healer with 0 gear, so it didn't give the best testing environment, but problems arose from threat generation outside of my taunt windows. It was very hard to pick up any threat from targets that weren't attacking me when I didn't have my taunt available, as I had no way of generating extra threat. This meant it was very difficult to tank effectively unless I had ample time to generate threat beforehand, and my damage reduction against casters was also very poor. When it came to bosses, I lacked any significant cooldowns to deal with any very spiky boss damage, so all in all, I was no better than any other tank on the market, despite having so much more armour, as it only caps out at 75% damage reduction. When it comes down to it, if this build was on a live server, then yes, it would be amazing at doing probably most of the things which you could do on live. But when you're putting yourself up against classes which can do everything that they want with all the different abilities, you really limit yourself being in form, as you can't use half of the abilities and half of the utility which you should be able to. Now sadly, the Nemesis random enchant has been nerfed down to 5% from 10%, making it impossible for a build like this to exist anymore. Honestly, I think this nerf is really stupid. The build required a lot of gold and resources to make, and provided no real benefit over other builds which far outperform it. It just seems like a nerf on fun more than anything, reducing the possibilities that people can do on a server that advertises endless possibilities. Instead of nerfing the ability to turn into form, why not nerf the damage modifiers instead, or buff other builds to make them possible rather than nerfing builds to make them not viable? It seems like a strange way to do it for me, to make builds more fun and interactive, from nerfing them to not being viable rather than buffing other things to make them viable. This frustrated me quite a bit, if I'm honest. But overall, I'm very glad that I tried to do this. Despite the results not leaning towards a viable build, and despite it not being possible now, I'm very glad I did try it out. It was a great experience hunting down pieces, crafting the perfect build and testing it to my heart's content. I can't wait to try out more things and hunt down the next Exodia. That's all from me, folks. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you all very soon.